everybody, I am Tom, and you are watching my first impressions of Anthem. The following is based on about 5 or 6 hours of gameplay, the first 5 or 6 hours. I'll be doing a full review of the game when I complete it, and do enough of the endgame content that I can justify the tag of review, but I felt that I needed to do this video in case my review isn't done by the release date of the 22nd, which is coming up pretty close, so I may not get all the content done by then, so just in case I want to have this out so you get at least my first impressions of whether or not you should grab this game. So, what is Anthem? In essence, it's a looter shooter in the same vein as Destiny, or to a lesser extent, Warframe. You play as a freelancer, which is a mech suit wearing warrior who ventures outside the relatively safe walls of the protected cities to help with, and get paid for, job requests ranging from helping save some scientists to calming unnatural happenings known as cataclysms. Anthem's basic gameplay loop involves finding guns and gear by completing missions, killing enemies, collecting resources, etc., and using that gear to upgrade your mech suit, known as javelins. The gameplay loop is enjoyable to me due to the third-person shooter mechanics being integrated really well with the extensive range of movement that's available to you, and there's really large areas that allow you to make use of that movement as a player, which brings us to the gameplay in Anthem is, thus far, the highlight of the experience. You have quick cooldowns on abilities, and you couple that with the freedom of movement that you have, and you're granted with a fast-paced action opportunity in each and every encounter. You drop an ability, then shoot an enemy while you're jumping off a bridge, then without hitting the ground you can fly under the bridge, popping up the other side to finish off the confused enemy. At this, admittedly early stage of the game, the combat is keeping me actively engaged with it, simply because of the cool shit that you can do, and it succeeds in evoking the feelings of a badass as you do nothing more than kill some normal enemies. The rule of cool, as it were. There are 6 difficulty ratings in the game, 3 of which are locked to endgame, that you can choose from the start of each expedition. The harder you make the mission, the more rewarding the loot you can get. The scaling of the difficulty seems to be done only by the scaling of enemies' health and damage. This is unfortunate in my eyes, as making the enemies more bullet spongy is a poor way of upping the difficulty in my opinion. I would have preferred if instead they upped the number of enemies or the variety of enemies on the higher difficulties rather than just scaling their health and armor. There are 4 mech suits, or javelins, to choose from, each corresponding to a class archetype. There is the Ranger, which is the most rounded character, having a good balance of attack and defense. And it comes across as me to like the default javelin. It's most versatile for most any content in the game as far as I can tell. The other 3, however, are more archetypical. They've got the archetype of a caster, a tank, and a rogue. The Storm class is the caster of the group. It has light armor and throws out elemental attacks from a distance. It also has the advantage of being able to hover for longer than the other classes, making it possible to float around the battlefield throwing down fire or lightning. The Colossus is unmistakably the tank. Having heavy survivability and looking like the Hulkbuster Iron Man suit, it's capable of dealing some heavy damage as well. And finally, there's the Interceptor, which incidentally is a javelin that I started with. It's the rogue type suit, putting a lot of emphasis on moving about the battlefield quickly and nimbly, and having comparatively quite short cooldowns on its abilities. I'm happy to say that although I've only got to play around with the Interceptor and a little bit of the Ranger, they give you the Ranger in the tutorial, they feel distinct enough from each other that I actually felt that there was a difference when I was playing them. Additionally, due to the way that the gearing system works, individual javelins of the same class can feel different too. For instance, my Interceptor began with an ability to throw an acid bomb that put a damage over time effect on a group of enemies. I changed that up to a homing shuriken bomb that did a bunch of upfront damage to a single target. Doing this changed my playstyle almost immediately, while still staying faithful to the speedy feeling of the Interceptor. You don't need to worry about spoilers here, I'm honestly not far enough into the story to spoil much even if I tried. However, what I want to talk about here is mainly the world itself. There's abundance of codex entries around the world that give you backstory to the pseudo-post-apocalyptic universe that we find ourselves in. Unfortunately, for me at least, this has the same problem that I feel with Destiny. The lore is so interesting, and yet not really that engaging, which leaves me with the feeling that, wow, this would have been awesome if they did a story-focused single-player game in this universe. Being a looter-based online game means that the focus has to necessarily be taken off the story, or at the very least watered down a bit, due to time and budget constraints. This is a real shame too, because much like with Destiny, the background and foundation has so much potential. and I'm afraid that, in the environment of the game as it is, it'll never really reach that potential. As for the story of the game itself, I won't go into specifics, as I said I want to avoid spoilers if at all possible, but it seems so far to be alright. It certainly isn't bad, but neither is it mind-blowing. The characters have some cool interactions, but they seem, right now at the very least, to lack the kind of depth that I so enjoy and expect from other BioWare titles. Which I think highlights a major problem I think many people are going to have with this game. It isn't a BioWare game. Not in the sense that most people would think of a BioWare game in any case. You think rich character-driven plots in a world to be immersed in. You don't really find this here. There's no doubt that this is an inevitability to some extent from being an online sort of looter-shooter game, but nevertheless I feel like that stigma is going to follow it in any case. This game, as far as general performance goes, has been a real mixed bag for me. My first day of playing, with the initial couple of missions, I was getting a solid 60, maybe dropping occasionally down to 55 or at the very worst 50 frames a second on a mixture of medium to high settings. Which on my machine is quite good for the average game release these days. And yet just a day later it was chugging at about 26 frames a second until I turned all my settings down to low/medium. I'm not entirely sure what would have caused this, there was no updates or anything, it would just kind of, from one day to the next, turn to crap. Granted, once I did turn those graphics down, it did run fairly smoothly for the rest of the time I was playing. And I also haven't experienced any crashes throughout my 6 or so hours of playing, which is sadly a good sign in this day and age of video game releases. Now, however, we have to get to the bad stuff. Once again, they haven't loaded in. I mean, look, their equipment loaded in this time, that's something, I suppose. Like, let's just get it done. That's what I thought. If you're standing on this rock, it breaks their AI. They don't know what they're doing. Anthem had some horrible bugs, left, right, and center. The chief among them being the complete inability for this game to load more than approximately 1 square meter in front of your player. The pop-in I experienced while playing Anthem is some of the worst I've seen in modern gaming. To the point where there are times where you'll be sniping an enemy and it turns out, wait, there was a mountain in front of where... What? Huh? Mountain? I have no doubt now that this is the chief reason that you cannot run in the hub area. The game isn't fast enough to load, so they slow the player down in an attempt to obfuscate this load in. They really need you to be able to run in this area, it's ludicrous. And you know why it is, it's because... I bet the reason they don't let you run in here is because the game doesn't load fast enough, so they have to slow you down before you get down these stairs. It's also why these stairs are a spiral staircase, and then you can't see outside until you get all the way to the bottom and turn around. And even then I've beaten it to loading a fair few times. Also, not strictly speaking a bug, but the fly/swim controls really need some work. As it stands now, if you point your cursor in a direction, the Freeze Lancer will slowly start heading in that direction, which really needs to be a direct translation from mouse input to direction movement for your javelin. Ironically, the flight is perfectly acceptable for short interludes during fights, where precision is needed because you can interlude the double jump with your flying to make it a lot easier, but it feels clunky and slow when you're travelling from one place to another and need to do a leisurely 45-degree turn. And while we're on the subject of going one place to another, the travelling waypoint system is incredibly annoying as it is. You have, for want of a better term, checkpoints along the way, and it will only show you one at a time. What this results in is you going to one checkpoint, and then the next one along in your checkpoint list not loading until 4 to 5 seconds after you reach the first one. This results in having to stop 3 or 4 times in a journey across the map, going from one objective to the other. I don't have a great deal to say about the monetization in Anthem. 1, because I've not really figured out how easy or hard it currently is to earn in-game currency, or coins. And 2, because the only purchases available with real-world money equivalent, i.e. shards, are cosmetic, which immediately makes it less egregious to me. Having said that, the fact that this game is as hugely expensive as it is makes me somewhat repelled by the fact that there's premium currency in it at all. Although, I'm not surprised, it is an EA game after all. So, to conclude, is Anthem worth the purchase? Honestly, no, not really. I'll have a more complete picture of it with my full review, which is coming in hopefully about a week or two, but from my first impressions, this is really not worth the asking price. Although, to be fair, there aren't many games that are worth Anthem's asking price. The Standard Edition is $89.99, and the Legion of Dawn Edition is a whopping $109.99. If you already have Origin Access, or are thinking of getting it anyway, then Anthem is well worth a look since it's free with Origin Access membership. But I'm not sure I can even recommend getting Origin Access just for Anthem. This game was in development for over 6 years, and oh boy does it not feel like it. The major bugs in this game exist way too commonly, and it's just, I can't recommend it in good conscience with this many bugs. Having said all that, the gameplay itself is really fun, and the backstory of the universe is deep and intriguing. The characters are interesting enough, and the game makes you feel like a mech-suited superhero with cool weapons and powers. Based on my first impressions, if they can fix the copious amounts of pop-in and bugs, it would most definitely worth picking up on sale, or down the line when they undoubtedly make it cheaper. And if you have or are thinking of getting Origin Access, then you should 100% pick up Anthem because it's an amazing experience, if incredibly broken. It simply isn't worth the enormous asking price. But there is a good game hidden in there somewhere as far as I can tell. I'm Tom, thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.